I mean, that was super close.
It was.
Do I need to get closer?
I think you should.
Closer. Welcome back to Empower Mississippi's Front Porch podcast. It's been a couple of weeks. Brett, absence makes the heart grow fonder, or so I'm told, but it's good to be back with you after a couple of weeks break.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a lot going on. It's sort of the off season, certainly in the state, with the legislature being away. But they have been working. We have a proposal on a medical marijuana bill awaiting a call, a special session from the governor in response to the initiative that passed in 2020 and all the ensuing activity. We had the Charter Authorizing Board vote down every charter application. So we have a lot moving with that. Federally, certainly the plans of the president, of the leadership in the House and Senate to spend upwards of $3.5 trillion, along with all of the tax implications to go with that we have going on. So we've got a lot going on here nationally. And maybe get some fun discussions in. As Ole Miss partisans, we are cautiously happy right now before going to Tuscaloosa. But we can talk about that.
We'll see what Saban has up his sleeve, right?
Right. And so we will dive into that. And I just hope everyone's having fun with college football. But let's start with, I think, what will certainly be the biggest issue, and what would be a very interesting special session is medical marijuana, is proposal for the state to move forward.
Yeah, so the governor has indicated that a special session is on the way. There seems to be an agreement between both the House and the Senate. At the time that the court struck down the ballot measure that had passed pretty overwhelmingly, the governor basically said, I'll call a special session when there's agreement between the two chambers. I think they've got that. By and large, the people that I know that were interested in the medical marijuana proposal as an initiative view the legislation as being positive legislation and a good move forward. It's like anything else, the devil's in the details, and I'm sure there are some things that people could pick at. But I think to me, sort of the bigger story is that the legislature is being responsive to the fact that whether you like medical marijuana or disagree with medical marijuana, the people of Mississippi pretty overwhelmingly said that they thought that they should have a medical marijuana program that allows a physician to make a decision about whether or not it's good treatment for a patient, and for that patient to make the adult decision whether or not they want to use that treatment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And I think if you look back to say 5 years ago, like, we were nowhere near this point. We had a CBD oil program that was very limited. The person it was named after wasn't even able to receive the treatment. You know, sadly enough, she went on to certainly become the sponsor of the initiative. And so, to your point, I think folks are happy with it. Certainly, I'm the proponents of medical marijuana. In some ways, it's expanded beyond the ballot initiative in terms of qualifying conditions. There are other, like anything, when the legislature gets involved, there's tax issues or excise tax issues involved, some local government issues that I think are a fair middle ground. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some questions around local governments opting out as an example, and what that means and how it'll end up looking in terms of coverage for people who do want access to that kind of treatment. You know, there's a second part of this whole conversation, though. I mean, obviously, medical marijuana drew a lot of attention during the 2020 election cycle. It drew a lot of attention in the court case that happened afterwards. But that court case has far-reaching implications as well, not only on medical marijuana, but essentially it eliminated the initiative process. It made it mathematically impossible for citizen-led ballot initiatives.
Yeah.
And so there's this second question about what, if anything, the legislature is going to do to restore the ability of citizens to push for a policy that they might think advantageous, where maybe the legislature has drug its heels.
Sure, and I mean, obviously medical marijuana, if it wasn't for the ballot proposal, we would be back at square one. We wouldn't even be having this discussion, I'm fairly certain. The ballot initiative has not really been a discussion, so medical marijuana has been the front and center of lawmakers sort of in this off-session part. I guess you can view the ballot initiative as not as imminently necessary or as timely in some regards. But I think everyone said we need something. Again, is what it looks like.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd say there is, I mean, the ballot process that we had before the court struck it down, arguably wasn't the right design. Certainly people availed themselves of that right, and I've said in other places I actually disagreed with the court's decision to strike the provision down. But amending the Constitution with policy is not ideal. The Constitution really should be the structure that defines what government is, kind of what its powers are, and not necessarily a place that you dump policy.
So you'd support a proposal where it was you're enacting policy via ballot initiative rather than
right. So I mean, this even medical marijuana is a traditional policy.
Correct.
So doing that by a statutory initiative versus by a constitutional amendment would be the better design if the legislature is going to take that up.
I agree. And thinking of medical marijuana in terms of if we wanted to add a new qualifying condition to it, right? Or if something, if anything changes, as we know, things change, right? It becomes much more difficult. That was the policy. That was what was in place. That is what proponents of ballot initiatives, or those who looked for ballot initiatives, that's all they had. So if we think back to voter ID and eminent domain, those initiatives that were also successful, I mean, that was what we had.
Yeah.
Switching from that, in that policy, we had the Charter Authorizing Board approve 0 charters for the upcoming year. This is the second time in 5 or 6 years. And it's, it's sort of like, where are we type thing. Our charter program's, 5, 6, or 6, 7, 8 years old at this point. It was 2013, the initial bill passed. You don't want to say it's fledgling, 'cause, it's not in a lot of ways, but there are issues certainly with the board and with getting schools in the state.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's clearly demand for new school options in the state of Mississippi. We've seen that during COVID. We've seen people shift out of core settings. We see parents who are frustrated with curriculum in certain settings, who are looking for alternatives. So certainly there's demand from parents and families for lots of options, including traditional public schools, including charter schools, including private schools. And this is one of the things that I think gets lost often in this conversation is it's really not about saying one system is better than another system. It's about recognizing that every kid is different and they have their own needs. And sometimes a different setting makes all the difference in the world. So giving options is important. Mississippi has approved charter schools. We do have charters in operation that are making differences in people's lives. I've visited some of those schools. You probably have as well. You've talked to those students. Yeah. You've talked to those parents. Yeah. You've seen the impact, and it's tremendous. I think, where we are from an organization standpoint is we want to see more charter schools. We want to see more micro schools. We want to see more education entrepreneurs who are saying, what, I think I can do education slightly differently and appeal to a certain kind of student. And so, yeah, I mean, it's frustrating to see fewer charters being approved, or in this case, none this year.
Yeah, because every year it's only 1 or 2. So, I mean, this is just 1 less than what we had the year before, right? So, but the 0 just stands out.
So I think there are 3 things to consider here. I mean, one is, should we be operating as stringently as we are in preventing new charters from starting? There's certainly a vetting mechanism that the Authorizer Board plays, and it's an important vetting mechanism. But are we making perfect the enemy of good? One of the real features of a charter school is that if it doesn't do well, it ultimately gets its charter revoked. And so that is a feature, not a bug. There's real accountability in making sure that they show progress in a way that most schools don't have.
Correct.
So I think there's an argument that the threshold that's being created to start is too high when you consider the fact that there's back-end accountability. I think the other thing is there certainly is room for some legislative improvement to expand where charters can go, to think about the process by which they are approved. And then the third thing I would just say, and it's something that we're eminently focused on, which is how do we make sure that people who are interested in starting schools have the resources they need, have an understanding of the system, have someone that helps them kind of facilitate the process. And so to me, those are the 3 things that we need to focus on is what does the threshold look like for approval? Legislatively, have we set ourselves up for success? And in a private sector way, is there the right support coming alongside people who want to start schools? And all three of those things have to be addressed in my mind. But to me, it is unacceptable to have a number of people who want to start a school and not see any of them be able to get off the ground.
I think, we talk a lot about parental accountability and that accountability mechanism that charters or non-traditional public schools have. We like to use the example of Arizona. Obviously, Matt Ladner from Arizona is our fellow on education. He'll talk about this a lot. During a 5-year period, I guess it would have been at this point, 2010 to 2015, there were 200 new charter schools opened in Arizona. That's a huge number. Obviously, Arizona is one of the fastest growing states in the country. It naturally makes sense. I'm sure public schools were overrun with new students. You had 200 new schools open. You had 100 schools closed during that same period. And they weren't closed by the state. They were closed by parents. Arizona has a very generous 15-year charter compared to a 5 in Mississippi. But again, it's the parents have gotten to this level to where it's like, okay, my child is not doing well here, so I can identify that, which we still can do that here, right? But we don't have that other option. In Arizona, it's, well, I've got this other school, I've got this charter school. We have open enrollment in Arizona. I can look in this district or that district if they have seats. So there's a lot of things that get us, that just empower parents in the state of Arizona that we could bring to Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, at some level, if you think about it in the context of, imagine if the town that you lived in only had one banker or one lawyer or one restaurant. The impetus or the incentive for high performance wouldn't be the same. Now, you introduce into that same environment 5 lawyers, 5 bankers, 5 restaurants, and suddenly people get to decide what their preferences are. They get to decide where they find satisfaction. And I think to some degree that's what you see in Arizona. And it is a feature that 100 of 200 schools close, because it literally means that parents decided, I'm going to take ownership over my kids' education, and I'm going to vote with my feet to bring them to the right setting. That's true empowerment.
It is, and it's revolutionary thinking in a lot of ways. Like, that is just not a general model parents take to schooling, and it's a neat thing. And really, we've seen it with the pandemic too, with parents empowering themselves in so many ways and what options their child needs because of X, Y, or Z. It doesn't matter, but they sought out that option because they're like, my child needs this. And so that was very neat to see.
Well, and I'll just say in closing, there's going to be a lot more coming from Empower in the next few weeks. We've been having some great conversations across the state around education. We think that there's real room to push a forward-facing, big agenda to make sure that more kids have access to a quality education, with the recognition that our real goal here, our vision here, is that every single child in the state of Mississippi has access to a quality education. We think it's possible. Not only do we think it's possible, we think it's imperative if the state's going to move forward the way we want it to. Shifting
focus from what's going on in the state, a lot's going on in D.C. A lot's certainly been written, discussed. There's a lot of different things, but the central thing seems to be $3.5 trillion spending bill, infrastructure bill, safety net expansion, whatever you might want to call it. Comes with all kinds of new taxes, increased taxes. We have things that you've commented on, like AOC's Tax the Rich dress she wore to a gala that cost about $30,000 to get into, although it does go to a good cause, right? So we have all of this sort of going on in D.C. right now. What are you thinking? What are you seeing as someone who's been and worked in D.C., worked on national issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a chaotic environment, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember, and I'm sure you do, when President Obama first took office and Democrats decided to push through the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, they were willing to take very small majorities and try to do really audacious things. And to some degree, they're doing the same thing now. Now, I would say that their majority of their mandate is even smaller than what it was before. But you've got a litany of packages out there between the $1 trillion for the infrastructure bill, this $3.5 trillion social safety net revisal, if you will, bill. And sort of the contents of it are things that are head scratching in a lot of ways in the midst of really uncertain economic times, where you've got massive inflation going on because all the loose money that's floating around out there out of COVID, that you're simultaneously having conversations about dramatically raising taxes on the largest employers in the country. You're having conversations about raising taxes on job creators in our communities. New surcharges on taxes, raising capital gains taxes, which, people don't realize this, but the people who are really sophisticated institutional investors, they figure their way out around these sorts of things, right? If they think the market's going to go down, they're going to start shorting the market. It's the people with 401ks.
Who does that hurt? Yeah.
It's the people with 401ks who end up getting hurt by something like a jump in the capital gains tax. It's not people who are sophisticated enough to hedge, which is largely the wealthy folks that supposedly are being targeted. So, all of this stuff, I think, is injurious to the economy if it happens in a pretty profound way. I think the bigger sort of philosophical question, though, Brett, is, and you mentioned the tax of the rich stress. It did trigger me, if you will. Yeah. But I think what people don't realize is that it's a false narrative. And so the Congressional Budget Office does this thing once a year that's the distribution of household income. And it's pretty incredible to look at, because what they do is they not only look at how much gets taken out of people's paycheck in taxes, but also how many benefits get paid out through government transfers, welfare, that kind of thing. So it's a picture of what income levels look like after taxes and government transfers, which I think is a fair way to do it, because it shows the whole picture. What did you pay? What did you get?
Right,
and
which we don't often include.
We
don't include.
It's rare. Yeah. But this is an interesting tool the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, puts out.
Yep.
The lowest quintile of earners, which is the bottom
50,
the bottom 20%, is so the bottom 20% of earners. Before taxes and transfers had about $22,000 in income a year. After taxes and transfers, that went up over 60% to $37,000 a year. So effectively, their tax rate is negative in that they're getting more from the system than what they're paying in by a whole lot, by $15,000 plus dollars. The top quintile, which is the top 20% of earners, have a reduction after taxes and transfers of about 24% of their income.
Sure.
So you're talking about a scenario in which the top 20% lose 24% of their income, and the bottom 20% gain over 60% of their income after taxes and transfers. But the narrative is that somehow the rich are avoiding paying taxes.
And we're not making the moral argument one way or the other. We're just sort of stating the facts, right? And so when you look at Heritage recently put out in relation to this, and lots of people have done this, right? The top 1% earn 21% of all income. They pay 40% of all income taxes. If you get to the top, what would that be? Top 10%, they earn 45% of the income, pay 70% of taxes. And so sort of like we know this, it's kind of, we are taxing the rich. Why do we see examples of, say, Amazon or of Bezos or whatever, things like that, or Warren Buffett would love to use examples of his secretary or whatever. You want to get kind of nerdy and?
I can. I think
so. In a way, we can understand.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I'll try. So I would say Bezos, as an example, does pay taxes. The question about what Amazon pays in taxes depends on what their business costs are, and lots of factors that go into whether or not they're operating at a profit or not, what they're doing with those profits. But Bezos is a great example of this. You look at Bezos and say, as an individual, he's worth over $100 billion. That's a heck of a lot of money. What is he paying in taxes? Well, it depends on what's being done with that money. Most of that wealth is on paper. It's not like he's Scrooge McDuck diving into a bunch of gold coins, right? That money is invested in stock, and primarily in Amazon stock. And assuming he's not selling it it has the advantage of buoying not only the company that is Amazon and its hundreds of thousands of employees, but also buoying the entire stock market and all of our 401ks. So that if Jeff Bezos were to sell his stock, not only would Amazon suffer dramatically, not only would its employees suffer dramatically, but the entire U.S. economy would suffer in a pretty dramatic way, and he would have to sell in order to have a tax liability. And so that's why people say things like that. It's not as if he's sitting on money and not paying taxes.
Or cheating on his taxes, right?
Correct. Correct.
He obviously pays, I don't want to say how much he pays CPAs, but it's got to be tens of thousands of dollars, right? I think that's probably a gross underestimate of what he's paying CPAs, but yeah. He's paying a lot of money. I don't know.
So it's just, look, at some level, those are anecdotes that are meant to fire people up.
Correct.
The data is overwhelming. People who are high-income earners pay way more than their proportion of income earned into taxes. We have a very progressive tax structure that already has a lot of redistribution and a lot of benefits. And look, as a matter of public policy, some people may look at it and say it's not enough. But it is fundamentally false to say that the wealthy aren't paying their fair share, or that the poor are shouldering the burden so that the wealthy can be wealthy. That's just not a factual statement.
Right. It's just getting over that narrative, right? It's an easy narrative.
Well, look, envy has always been a powerful tool. It's always been a motivator,
sure.
Right? And but it's also a sin, biblically speaking.
And I would say this issue cuts both ways, right? I think there's people on the right who sort of have that same mentality, like, yeah, that man's getting ahead. I don't think it's just a AOC type thing, which helps drive the narrative. And so I think it's just sort of where we are with politics, where we are with society today.
So, somewhere along the line, it became okay to want to take from what other people have earned, right? And it's the Thomas Sowell quote that it became greedy to want to keep what you've earned and somehow charitable to want to take what somebody else had earned. And it's a real problem in the way that people are thinking today.
I agree.
College pick'em.
I think Gina may have been a pick ahead of me, but she also mans the books, so it's kind of,
For clarity,
sketchy.
Gina is Empower's compliance officer.
But not in charge of our, but our compliance does not reach to college football pick'em. We're doing good with that. It's just been a fun season. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. It's just been fun seeing full stadium, seeing fans say, yeah, I'm going to go to a game. I'm going to live my life. And
for a middle-aged man, this is Christmas, is what it really is.
Yeah.
This is the best time of year by far, and there's so much hope going into this weekend. I know we're both Ole Miss fans, but you get to the point that you're at a stage like Ole Miss is, where they're 3-0, and you think, hey, what if?
What if? Yeah.
What if we could do this? And we're going to Tuscaloosa to face off against arguably the greatest there's ever been, and Nick Saban.
Yeah.
I love him or hate him. The guy is obviously at the top of his game. Alabama gets the best players, recruiting and through transfers.
Yep.
So, it's going to be one heck of a matchup. I will say this. I've not been this optimistic about our chances, which means we'll lose by 50. But I haven't been this optimistic about our chances since the Chad Kelly era. I think Matt Corral is just playing lights-out football. I saw a stat this morning. We're leading the nation in total yards and total points.
Yeah.
Offense is...
getting a little Las Vegas-y. Corral was, at least a favorite in the Heisman all of a sudden. It sort of wasn't all of a sudden, but I don't think many people thought, we had hopes, but didn't necessarily say, oh, yeah, he's going to be there. Obviously, he's performed well. Vegas, I saw an initial line had Alabama minus 20, now down to may have been a different line. Alabama minus 14, so basically giving Alabama 2 touchdowns.
I didn't realize you were such a sports gaming guy.
We can shift
How
it.
much you got on the game?
I would not bet on Ole Miss. It's too personal. It's too been there, too much. Already lost enough emotionally on Ole Miss. But
Is College Game Day there?
no.
Where are
It
they going?
is. Are they in Athens or Georgia, Arkansas? I think they might be there.
Okay.
I don't know, Joanna, check it out. I'm not positive. I know it's not Tuscaloosa, which I was kind of happy about as someone who wants to shy away from attention for his college football team. But yeah, I mean, it's what we have. It's where we
Yeah.
are. I will say, though, Mississippi does have sports gambling, does not have online sports gambling. So maybe we can talk about that in terms of
Well,
a policy.
what I'll
to
say is it's going to
create
be a great
jobs.
weekend of college football. Arkansas, it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
To
Oh,
prove,
yeah.
To prove that they're pretty good.
Yeah, same
To
thing.
your point about the Georgia game.
Yep.
Mississippi State and USM have got to figure some things out. I watched the LSU State game this past weekend. I thought they fought hard. I mean, it was a close game at the end.
Yeah.
A lot of ways that Leach team reminds me of Matt Luke at Ole Miss. Decent between the 20s, kind of boring to watch, dinking and dunking you down the field, and just coming up shy in really close games with some big mistakes along the way. So hopefully they can get it together.
I think that's right.
I think USM's a bigger work in progress, but I think I've told you both got nephews at both schools
Yeah.
playing ball, so
Very cool.
hope they can pull it through.
College football is what it's all about. We good?
Yeah,
We good?
enjoyed it.
Enjoyed it, Russell. We'll talk to you next time.
All right.